All right. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
We're about 1 minute out before the start, so I'll give it another minute and then get it started and do the introductions.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm so, there we go. All right. Well, thank you and welcome to everybody who is joining us today for our discussion on harnessing the power of multicultural marketing. I will get this started by introducing these lovely ladies that are on the screen with me today. Thank you so much for joining me, as well as to everybody who's joining us both live and on recorded. First, I'd like to introduce Stacie de Armas. She is the Senior VP of Diverse Insights, Intelligence, and Innovation at Nielsen. Stacie, if you want to say hello.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Syringa. Nice to be here today. And Liz, I look forward to having this conversation with you today, too.
Stacie, I noticed on your profile that you are one of Latina Magazine's top Latina executives, as well as Imogen Foundation's one of their most powerful and influential Latinos in entertainment. Congratulations on that. I think that's very exciting and obviously lends a lot of credence to our conversation today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure and obviously an honor to be recognized within our industry. Imagen Foundation is an organization that's really close to my heart that we've worked with for a long time. But the truth is, Nielsen allows me the resources and the access to data to put out the stories that are making a difference in the industry. And when I am privileged enough to receive the benefits from that work, it's of course an honor, but it's really a testament to the research that Nielsen does and makes available for us to share with the industry. So thank you for the acknowledgement, though.
Well, thank you very much. And Liz, you are the co-founder and president of CIMA Advertising. And I read on your profile, and also you've said this to me yourself, I love this. You call yourself a Mexican. Am I getting that right?
Yes, I am a child of immigrant parents, Mexicana and Puerto Rican. And it's been fun. They say 200%er. I'm a 300%er because I can speak the Puerto Rican dialect and the Mexican dialect, and then obviously American. And it's been a wild ride. I've been in multicultural advertising for what is now most of my life, 24 years, and have worked at amazing companies, and so grateful to be here with you, Syringa, and offering me the opportunity. And Stacie, I am a total fangirl. The publications that you've pushed out have actually helped me build the stories for putting CIMA together. So it's been so great. And then almost serendipitous to have met you at South by Southwest and now to be here on this panel with you. It's been really fantastic. So thank you both.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you, ladies. And I am the Director of Business Development at Infocore, and I specialize in helping to curate audiences for specific marketing campaigns. I work with all different industries, a lot in the automotive, and I'm just passionate about the audiences that we're going to be talking about today. So if it's okay with you, I am going to go ahead and get this started. Again, thanks for everybody joining me. And this is meant to be conversational. If you want to post anything in the comments or have questions, please feel free to do so. And let's see. Here we are. Hope everybody is able to see and read this. So what we're going to cover today is really divided into four separate parts, actually. The first being the importance of the multicultural population. We have some statistics to share with you, and I know Nielsen also has some amazing information available on that. And then Stacie and I will talk about multicultural marketing and why it is so crucial for brands today. And Liz will help us talk about content and creative for reaching the multicultural community. And then I will also be talking about utilizing different methods to target this audience in specific. And then towards the end, we'll have time for some questions. So if everyone's okay, we will get going with that. Let's start, and feel free, ladies, if you want to jump in here. I think a lot of this is known, but it still is worthwhile to take a look at again to sort of set us up today. And that is the population of the multicultural and diverse communities are growing daily in the US. It's now 37% of the population is considered multicultural, with 19 of that being Hispanic, African American 12, and Asian at 6. But it is growing exponentially.
Mm-hmm. Well, can I add something to that slide, if that's okay? Just some context. What I think is really fascinating about this is we generally tend to aggregate all the data and look at it this way. So we look at Hispanics, and we look at African American, Black, and we look at Asian. But when you disaggregate the data, for example, from the Black community, one of the most growing segments is actually Black communities or Black people from outside of the US. So we're having a lot of people coming over from Africa, specific countries in Africa. And we actually recently just did a piece of work on the growth of the different communities and their American Black experience, because we have a very African American culture here, and we oftentimes marketing and branding is very centered on the African American experience. But that is a portion of the Black diaspora which is growing. So as we think about how the Black community, of which the African American population is part of, is sort of changing and shifting and growing, it's really interesting to think about how marketing and advertising will follow that lead. Now, when it comes to Hispanic communities, we've done a lot of that, right? You see, in fact, Liz opened up talking a little bit about her experience with, Puerto Rican Spanish and Mexican Spanish. And I am Cuban. I live in Los Angeles, which is a very Mexican-focused culture. And we know the country is, of the percentage of Latinos here, more than 63% are Mexican, but we all have distinct cultural backgrounds, which really also influence the how we look at a lot of things. One of the most important things that's surfacing now is how we look at politics, right? Your country of origin and the political environments in your country of origin often influence how you receive American politics and react to them and your political opinions here. So the same thing when you disaggregate that data, and we've done it, like I said, in the Hispanic community, but when you disaggregate it in the Black community and equally in the Asian community, which we sort of round up, right? When we look at the Asian community here, it's encompassing East Asian, it's encompassing, Southeast, it's encompassing so many different parts of the Asian community. When you disaggregate it, you can really start to see where the communities are growing and where the opportunity is. And this is the advantage, I think, for brands, thinking about intersectional identities and the details. There was this song that my kids used to listen to when they were young, and we would listen to like Kids Place Live in the car. And there was this line from it, and I still say it today, and is everything that matters is in the details. And I think that's true too when you think about marketing. And for any Kids Place Live listeners out there, you'll remember this song from, gosh, probably 15 years ago now. But everything that matters is in the details. So while we're going to talk a lot about sweeping trends today, it is the details under that which underpin this. And I'll add one last thing, and then I'll get it back to you, Syringa. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to take your show. We're actually.
Well, that's why we're here today, is to listen to you.
The Hispanic community specifically, and you hear this stat thrown around, but I want to give some context to it, is responsible for more than 50% of the population growth of the entire country over the past 5 years. So when you look at the pop growth between, just in the last 5 years, and you think, okay, where is it coming from? Is it immigration? Is it, is people are having babies? Who is it? Of what demographic, et cetera? What socioeconomic group? What, race and ethnic group? More than half of the growth that the whole country experienced to our bottom line population came from just this 20% of the population. So then that begs and you hear that stat a lot, 50% responsible for 50% of the growth. But again, it is all in the details, everything that matters in the details. Why is that? Well, the community tends to be on average 10 plus years younger than non-Hispanic white. And when you're younger, you're more likely to be in childbearing years, right? And so when you're more likely to be in childbearing years, you're more likely to bear more children. There are also cultural elements around faith and family, which lead to larger families, which is something else that we can see. So it's all in the details that help us understand why this 20% is contributing more than half of the growth that the country has experienced. So I'll pause there. I think I've talked a lot, but I'll try not to do that on every slide. But Liz, I'd love to hear your commentary on that, because I know you think the same way I do. We are like thinkers in that you got to disaggregate the data, you got to break it apart, and you got to see what's happening, really under the hood to understand why the car is running the way that it is.
Yeah. And that I can credit to my upbringing and background at Univision, right? We've been working alongside Nielsen when I was there in what is setting the tone for US Hispanics, right? And so we look at it, and it's 67 million of us. It's 1 in 5 people, going back to your younger, larger households. So it's, I think, 3.7 versus 2.4 people for non-Hispanics. And so we are growing exponentially faster. We blew through the estimates for the GDP. We had said versus the last census that the Hispanic GDP was going to grow approximately 2.4 million. And in 2023, we surpassed that. So we surpassed our 2030 estimates in 2023. What does that mean? That means that we're growing faster, educational attainment, wealth attainment, all of that is almost in hyperactive mode, right? And all of that has changed in just the last 5 years. So it's really exciting to be here and to be a part of this. And then to see how much it's grown in the last 10 years, furthermore, in the last 5 years, where I feel everything's just been supersized into, where we are today.
Yeah, it's been a really, exciting to watch, exciting to be part of the growth. You and I both have a lot of years in the industry. One thing I'll add, and I hope we get to it, Syringa, is there's also a lot of pressure lately on multicultural marketing, diverse marketing, DEI marketing, all the different names. And there is a lot of conversation around how do we handle it? Are brands still interested in doing it, and thinking about some of the pushback that there's been over the years? I think Liz and I both have some anecdotes about how that could work. And if you'll hang around with us for a little bit longer, we'll get to that, and we'll give you some tips and tricks on how to manage some of that. We know there is pressure around DEI. We all are aware of the narrative around it. But I think one of the advantages here is this is not and we'll talk about it, this is not a DE&I strategy at all. This is how are we going to grow our business over the next century? How are we going to grow our businesses? How are we going to grow the economy over the next 10 years? How are we going to grow our individual businesses over the next 5-10 years? What is the economy going to look like in the population over the next 30 or 40 years? These are the things we need to think about. And when you think about it that way, it's really just a business strategy. It's not a DE&I strategy.
Right? Because are you speaking to 58% of the growth, or are you not? And as we look down, like millennials and Generation Z and Generation Alpha, Latinos make up more and more of those as we go, right? So
well, multicultural adults in general, and the rise in public sentiment around wanting to identify with cultures and countries of origin. One of the communities we don't often hear talked about a lot, but is increasingly important, is the Native American Indigenous community here in the U.S. Like, it has, I have a lot of data that we'll get to it, that to share about how the, generally when people think about the Indigenous or Native American community, they're thinking about them as sports mascots, or in this very sort of antiquated way that they've been presented in content, versus a more contemporary view, and really understanding that narrative. Thankfully, there has been some really great television content lately endorsed by some of our partners. Illuminative is one of them, one of the organizations we work with, that really endorses these more contemporary views of communities. But as brands get smarter and they disaggregate that data and start to think about intersectional identities, they'll do much better at moving their business along, and really creating some brand affinity among diverse communities when they genuinely engage. So I'm going to pause again. I'm sorry, Syringa. I took that one slide and just kind of kept going with it.
No, I love it though. No, that's why we're here today.
Yeah. What else do you have?
Who needs slides, right? No, I did have this slide, just as you mentioned. the details matter, and we know that it's going to be different in Miami than it is in LA, than it is in Washington State, than it is in Arizona. And fortunately, part of what we can talk about today is ways that you can make your communications unique to the people that you're speaking to, so that no matter which market you're in and targeting, you're going to be effective. That's the only thing I really wanted to accomplish with that particular slide.
And so I want to add one thing on that too, is while the demographics are changing around us, and they're changing in a wildly different way, by market and by coast, and and we know that the white non-Hispanic population is sort of compressing. By 2035, it looks like it's going to be maybe 58% from down from where it is now. So that communities, a total, when I should say that, I mean of the total, right? And the other communities are growing. But one of the things that I think is fascinating is this isn't really a story about the diverse communities against, or non-Hispanic white, or communities. What it really is about is the diversification of the American identity. So one stat I love to point to is that 87% of all viewers, regardless of their race or ethnic background, are interested in seeing more programs that feature people outside of their identity. So that tells us that America is actually, maturing, I should say, in wanting to receive other stories outside of your own personal experience. And so when that's the case, it presents opportunities for brands to really think about how they build affinities with all audiences, where they are present, whether it is in, like a print publication or digital outlets, but where they place their brand, the environment in which they place their brand, not only builds affinity with the community within that content, but it builds affinity for all, right? Or for 87% of viewers that say, yeah, I want to learn more about other cultures through the content that I watch.
I love that. You mentioned brands that are doing this. Are there some that you can think of that are a good example of speaking to diversity and utilizing it to help their brand grow?
Well, I have a couple of examples actually right off the top of my head, because I'm working on a project this morning for Pride Month, and I wanted to take a look at content that featured people who identify as being within the LGBTQ plus community. And then I wanted to look at brands at a pretty significant rate. So where either 50% of the cast or higher are of any given show have identified as LGBTQ plus. And then I wanted to look at the brands and advertisers and the categories that are within that content, right? Because if you're advertising in a show where 100% of the cast or 80% of the cast has identified as LGBTQ, then you're also demonstrating your values. That's a tangible demonstration of your brand's values, because you are putting the brand within content that features LGBTQ plus people or stories. And that says something about your brand. It is, it shows that you are an ally of the community, that, when you're within the content. So I wanted to know, who are those brands? I'll give you this example specifically since it's coming up on Pride Month. Who are those brands? Who are the companies that are really walking the talk, that are investing in the spaces that are inclusive? In this case, a lot of CPG. Used to be in some of the content I looked at, that pharma really over-indexed when it came to LGBTQ plus content, which, I understand, but there are a lot more to the LGBTQ plus experience, and pharma sometimes has just been, so ever present on platforms. So it was really refreshing to see that in a couple of shows, the top 3 categories did not include pharma. It was CPG, so think P&G, Unilever. Cosmetics, L'Oreal was a positive one in there. And also the other I saw was Bev Al. So there were a lot of other beer brands that are reaching out to the community saying, come drink our beer. We want you to come drink our beer. And I thought that was really fascinating in this piece of work that I did. I also noticed that there was a lot of financial institutions. So we've done this kind of work for a few years, but it's interesting to see the evolution of the brands that have always committed themselves to the community and been in the content, to today, this really like this breadth of brands that want to engage with the LGBTQ plus community. In the Hispanic community, there are a lot of brands that do it really, really well. McDonald's is one of them. We know who they are. Walmart is another amazing, example. But it's really nice to see that for other segments that often don't get some of the same shine, that there are brands that are really stepping in and stepping forward and saying, we want to engage with you, and we're going to put in the work to build your trust and build a relationship with you, and build that affinity.
You mentioned beverages, and I think Modelo is one of those ones that kind of did the opposite. It was really entrenched in the Hispanic community. Mm-hmm. I know it was a beer that was very popular in the Hispanic community, but it has grown to where now I think in across the United States, it's one of the top selling beer brands, and they sort of did the opposite. I know that that's a great product.
Yeah, there are a few brands that are doing that are spreading their wings, but that's a testament to the power of the Latino community, right, Liz?
Right.
Like the jarritos. You are hard pressed to not find jarritos on a menu here for almost anywhere. I don't care where you're eating. Like there is,
right? And into the hard seltzer space, we have Topo Chicos leaning in, right? And they're
Topo Chicos. You can find it anywhere in LA. And I think that's such a strong testament to this concept of it's not that the brands are necessarily, and I don't want to take any credit away. Many are wisening up, right? But I think it's also that the Latino community, in the cases we're giving example, Tajín, have brought the brand
avocados from Mexico. Mm-hmm. I mean,
but this is the unique advantage of the Latino consumer is we're sharing our affinities, our products, and our brands beyond just our community. And it's a huge opportunity for brands that engage with the Latino community. And I'm glad that Latino focused brands are now catching on to the power of this consumer to cascade your brand beyond what you had imagined.
It's a really deep halo effect, and it's coming in, and we're inserting ourselves culturally into society, and not culturally in many ways, right? But to be able to impact society the way we are, can we just talk about the Met 2 weeks ago? We had 2 Puerto Rican co-chairs. Like, when has that happened, right? And so those things to me are signs that we're moving in a positive direction, because I even think of my own growing up here, right? And how different it was in the 80s to what my kid is going through now in school. And I'm like, you're living the life that I wanted, right? Because you're free to show up as you are. They celebrate who you are. And I think that that's really special, that there's more acceptance, and then a lessening of us needing to acculturate, and rather we're all here together. Let's share in the experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I love that brands are now coming on board with that. I'm looking for a stat I have around the importance of community for brands. Here's one that I have at my fingertips here for LGBTQ plus communities. 72% of the LGBTQ plus community told us that they will stop purchasing from brands that devalue their community. So, what does devalue actually mean? There's a lot of ways for us to interpret that. But if you flip that over, that means that they will also continue to engage with brands that support their community in different ways. And this is true for the Latino community, for the Black African American community as well. Increasingly, our communities are putting pressure on brands to be present, to do the right things, and to earn their affinity. And I think brands are responding. Some brands are still in the learning phase, but brands are really responding, and they're responding in the right ways. I want to learn about your community. I want to earn your trust. I want to earn your dollar. And it's a journey, but there are a lot of great agencies, CIMA and others, that our brands can work with if they have questions about how to do that.
Well, Stacie, I think that's a really good segue into the section that I wanted to cover with Liz, which really does have to do with creative and content, and why it's important to do the research, which Nielsen has some amazing. Oh, I just wanted to mention, I saw you post the other day. You also have a new Asian study that has come out. Is that correct, on the AAPI?
We do. Thank you for mentioning it. We actually just released it, and I have a whole bunch of Asian stats here that if it comes up, I would love to share it. It is May, so it is AA and HPI month, Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander month. We are so excited that we're always so excited about our report, but we're especially excited about this one. It's one of the most robust reports on the Asian American media experience that we've ever released. Pat Ratulangi is the thought leader who heads this work up for us at Nielsen. I'm thrilled about this piece of work. We took it in a bunch of turns and in ways we haven't typically done. Our reports in the past have really focused on sort of the power of the community, the growth, a lot, based a lot in census data. We took all of that as the foundation, and then we decided we're going to tell more nuanced stories about the media experience, whether it's with Asian media, whether it's with media in language and Asian languages, whether it's Asian audiences or content that features Asians. And so it's a really deep dive specifically into the media and entertainment experience for Asian audiences, platforms, and brands that want to reach this community. So take a look at the report. There's also a lot on the cutting room floor, and it doesn't all make it in. So if you have specific or unique questions, there's a stat I'm looking at here around the importance of in-language media for Asian communities, this really being the most trusted format, which if you're doing political advertising and you're looking at, where you should place those ads and you want them to be on trusted platforms, think about in language, and we can help you find those spots. But happy to share more on that. But it's easy to find. You can just Google Nielsen DIS Asian American or Nielsen Asian American report, and it'll take you right there and you can download the latest. So thank you, Syringa, for bringing that up.
Okay, and I put that in the chat as well.
Great. I can drop the link right to the report, I think.
Perfect. If you want to drop that in chat, that's terrific. So Liz, speaking of, because I know this is where CIMA comes in to really help out their clients, and that's in helping them create content and put it together that really speaks to the community, the diverse community.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things to consider when thinking about multicultural marketing. First is the content and the creation of this content. And then second is how are we going to reach these communities, right? Where are we going to place these beautiful stories that we're putting together, right? And this is where we come in. So we know, and you said it earlier, New York is not LA, is not Miami, is not Chicago. And these, not only are these markets vastly different, but then when you take into consideration the fact that there are 33 Latin American countries, 21 of which are Spanish speaking, when you get into some of these markets like Miami, that is heavier Caribbean, or, Stacie cited earlier that of the US Hispanics, about 80% of them are Mexican. And beyond that, we have Puerto Rican, and you name it. And as you go from market to market, some of that shifts, and some of it shifts significantly, and some of it shifts in smaller pockets. We have markets where the Hispanic population has, grown exponentially in just the last 2 years. And so these are all things to take into consideration when thinking of the bus approach and then the delivery of this. So what we do is we start with a Nielsen. They've been doing the legwork much longer than we have as an agency. And we bring in others like Claritas, and we take a look on a local market level. How does this look like? And this is where we begin to tell the story. Brands that want to get into the space think that sometimes by making minor adjustments like a translation, that is enough to reach these different communities. And the truth is that it's not. We're holding brands accountable. At the end of the day, everyone wants to see and feel people that are relative to them, right? We're as individual as we are sometimes. Community is what brings us back, right? It's what reminds us of home. It's what reminds us of family. And I think that a lot of the advertising that gets it right roots it in that. And so we look at the data. What are they doing on a market level? What does that market look like? What does that region look like? And then bring in behavioral, lifestyle. What do they like to do? And from here, we begin to build stories, right? And we begin from this story, we begin to think about how do we distribute it? What channels do we use? And this is where partners like Infocore come in, right? What targeting capabilities do we have on the back end? But when we start from the ground up and when we take the time to look at the data, to put together a story, to put together a plan, that is where the magic happens, because there are so many cultural nuances. And
Do you want me to share a couple of your slides?
If you want to, if you don't, it's perfectly fine.
Okay.
So the first rule when looking at creating content is don't take your universe to be the total universe. I'm Mexican and Puerto Rican. It's very easy for me to think from this standpoint, right? If I live in Miami, it's very easy for me to think from the Miami standpoint. So it's walking in and leaving all of your biases aside. Everything that you thought you knew about your own culture, put it aside, because there's so much more to learn. And it's imperative that we utilize these tools to, again, paint a picture. And once we start looking at the data, the spots, the creative, the stories build themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you know, for instance, that Latinos over-index in F1 and WWF, right? These are things, little nuances that once you dig in, like AT&T did with their Lucha Libre content, those are awesome. I saw the billboards in my old neighborhood. I'm like, this is awesome. They're speaking to our community, right? And so much like Stacie said earlier about the loyalty. So I think for Latinos, it's like 80% loyalty once you do start speaking to them in their culture, in their language. And in short, that is the creative process and the planning process, and bringing in data partners and looking at things not only top down, because it's easy to do top down, right? You put a national plan together, 19% of the population, go ahead and deliver that. But when you break it apart and you look at the details and you take the time and you invest into the regions and you prioritize the markets and the messaging by market, that's where the highest return on investments happen.
100%. I wish I had a sound bite for that, because what you said is exactly right. People underestimate the power of the nuance in creative, and creative is what makes the world go round. I mean, that's what really it's the message and how it's delivered is especially the nuance in those messages are what what build that affinity. I saw a piece of work once by an agency. It was for McDonald's, and there was these subtleties throughout this Halloween. It was around like purchasing your Halloween stuff at Walmart, and there were these subtleties in different places, like an ofrenda, like that. The camera doesn't even stop. It's just like, and you notice it. If you notice it, and I speak to it like as an example. That nuance really matters. A quick example. I don't know if anyone saw. In the Heights, back when, it was right after COVID, it was kind of the timing was difficult. But anyways, in the Heights, there was a Cuban grandmother there, the abuelita. And there was one scene where, first of all, it felt so great to have any kind of recognition in a piece of content. But then there was this scene where the camera kind of goes by her kitchen, and it's not even on screen for 2 seconds. I think it just goes by, but you can see the ropa vieja boiling or like cooking, And I was in the theater with my dad because I made my whole family go see it. I'm like, we're supporting this. We're all going. So we all went. And he looked at me and he gave me the elbow. And I thought, so many people in this, like he elbowed me and he's like, did you see that? And my whole row was like, for this 2 seconds. But it was like such a moment where we felt so seen. And it was such a tiny nuance. But that's why it's also important, Liz, and I'm sure you'll agree, when you're building that creative, to have people that understand that nuance. So those sorts of things can be present. It sounds tiny and people are like, does that stuff matter right now? It really does. It can build the affinity and the longevity and the loyalty that brands depend on in order to elevate their sales, to get that brand lift and that sales lift.
It does, because my son, who is the ripe age of 10, the first time we saw a movie that was inclusive of our culture was Wakanda Forever, right? And And when he saw Namor come out with his wings and his ears and everything, he couldn't have been happier. We watched the movie 4 times that week. Most recently, Blue Beetle and the Daddy Yankee song and the uncle living with the grandma and all of the family lives together. And he's like, that's like grandma's house. People notice, and kids notice, and they're a lot smarter, I think, than I wish I had the knowledge that he has now. But the fact that him at such a young age notices those nuances is, we have to do better work about making sure that we have something that they can look forward to, that gives them space, that allows them to show up as they are.
So I want to add one more thing. So we're talking about creative, and I know that's your area of expertise, the creative, the planning, and the placement. The other nuance that shouldn't be ignored here is the content in which that creative is placed.
Right.
The content and the creative together are what can deliver the greatest impact. So we've done a couple of pieces of work understanding whether or not how inclusive content delivers based on the how inclusive creative delivers based on the programmatic content it's in. And when you can marry the right creative with content that is meaningful, that over indexes, in this case, we're talking about Latinos, that really content where people are engaged and they're, we have this thing that we call cultural watchability, which is when the percentage of the audience that's watching the piece of content over indexes for any specific or unique ethnic group. But when you have, let's say, high cultural watchability and you have a really meaningful piece of content that is, nuanced and culturally resonates, and you add those together, you actually get a 2x. You get a higher return on that placement than you would in just any other traditional place where you're looking maybe only at gross impressions. So it's interesting because we've been talking more about contextual advertising, which is placing that creative work that you've worked so hard to get right in the right content so that you can really maximize that return. Contextual advertising today, there's a lot of work to be done, especially if you're doing programmatic placement. It's kind of hard to really ensure that you're in that right spot and that you understand what you're getting. But we are doing some work behind the scenes. My colleague, Veronica Hernandez, is doing some remarkable work with the Grace Note, which is a part of Nielsen, to really understand how we can better bring that forward in the systems that people are using to place their buys so that they can make sure that they have the perfect marrying of these two pieces. Right?
It's It's what we're working on here as an agency too. So one of my first jobs was to talk to every single data provider and media partner that I could, and how can we effectively and efficiently, but moreover, intentfully reach this consumer, right? And so that's a lot of work that we've put into it. We know that there's still a lot of work to be done. I wish it was easy, an easy place, but as I like to say, good news, there's a lot of work to be done. Bad news is
that is good news.
Good news. It is good news. Well, Liz, you hit on it. You and I have had many conversations about helping you find and identify these consumers. And where Infocore comes in is we actually work with multiple partners. And I am going to share my screen for just a moment, if that is okay. There we go. We actually work with multiple partners who can help you curate the audiences. We don't own any of the data ourselves. So our job is to go out there and find you the audience that is going to most closely match with who you are trying to reach. So you've done the work to identify characteristics about the consumers you're wanting to reach and wanting to talk to. You have the content that is going to resonate with them and is going to really speak to who they are. And we can help find the audiences. I know Nielsen can as well, but we can help you find the audiences by utilizing segmentation. That one of the things that we can take a look at, obviously language is one, and there are a lot of data partners out there that can get you Spanish versus English, but we can take it so much farther than that, utilizing country of origin. Again, we know that's going to be different in Miami than it is in LA. additional things like, is their grandparents living at home? Are their parents living at home? Religion, you mentioned earlier, Stacie, that faith and family are very important. This information is available in audiences so that you can segment out and you're communicating the right message and the right content to the right people. So we do have the ability to build those audiences, and we work with your strategy teams, and we work with your content teams to make sure that the whole thing all kind of comes together. And some of the audiences, we had some slides on the breakdown of the a city of origin, but we've kind of we've already covered that. We've gone past that. But some of the audiences are, the modeling has already been done for you. If that's something that you're interested in looking at, this is an example of segmentation that has taken and divided the Hispanic community up into the different assimilation buckets, as far as they identify where they're at in the assimilation process. And the interesting thing about this, bucket one being they've recently migrated to the United States and their cultural practices at home are much more of their country of origin. And bucket number 5 being they're mostly Americanized and practice American culture and assimilation. And Stacie, I think you can speak to this as well. What we are seeing is the people that fall into the buckets of more of their country of origin cultural practices at home is actually growing, not just from the standpoint that the number of people are growing, but the people who are practicing their cultural at home. And I know Stacie, you and I, or I mean, Liz, you and I have had this too.
I can add to this a little bit. I think perhaps a more contemporary way of thinking about this is when it comes to acculturation. I mean, assimilation, I don't know if that's not a term that we use much anymore. We talk about it in terms of acculturation. And the truth is, I think today, as you've identified, Syringa, people are increasingly wanting to own all of the portions of their identity. So I think about my kids and the fact that they are US born and they're second generation. They lean into culture harder than I ever maybe had permission to. And I want to explain that in a minute. As a young adult growing up with not really a lot of the internet, I'm aging myself here. I didn't have access, especially when you think about a country like Cuba. So a little bit different with Mexico, right? There was access to content, to stories. You could visit your family. Specifically for me, being entirely culturally isolated from my family, my cultural experience in Cuba. Now, yes, I have lots of family in Miami. I have my own family. I hear stories, but it's a very distinct divide, not being able to consume any content, to hear any music, to really be part of the evolution of the culture in your country, and without access on the internet and being able to watch, shows and learn more. The culture that I retained was mostly what I acquired from my family, and then things, in honestly from Miami. But I see my kids today with an entirely different experience. We've actually been to Cuba. They communicate on WhatsApp with their cousins in Cuba. We have a very different experience today. And so as a result, what you said is this, what we used to call the boomerang effect, sort of coming back to culture, growing up as a kid, trying to, as much as you can, be an American kid because it served you perhaps better based on where you lived when you were out in public. And then, but as you get older, really coming back to culture and saying, I want to identify. That's kind of old. More contemporary is kids are not only not losing that, but wanting to lean in harder because they want to own and reclaim those pieces of their identity that were perhaps stripped from their parents and beyond. So I think it's actually really fascinating. And language, you talked a lot about language acquisition and working on on language fluency for the younger generations. I've actually seen in my experience and in the work I've done, that really explode. I see, and I can experience with my kids again, my kids are leaning in harder than ever to acquire the fluency that they want and that they feel they should have and that they want as part of their identity. And it's really a remarkable time, because what you end up getting then, I think about, again, my son watches a lot of content in YouTube in Spanish, a lot. It's easier. There's, they're short videos, they're fun. So it's very easy to understand, not complex themes. So it's one of the ways that he works on his fluency, and he enjoys that content. So when you're reaching him in that content with, let's say, a bilingual ad or a Spanglish ad, you're getting what we talked about earlier, right, Liz? Which is that you're getting that 1 + 1 = 4, because he's in a place where he wants to be. He's already more deeply engaged and sort of actively consuming this content. So when a piece of creative reaches him in that spot, even though he's essentially English language, maybe primary, but a bilingual speaker, you're getting an advantage. So the fact, Syringa, that you can help disaggregate audiences by things like culture and language usage, and help your clients better understand what that cultural journey looks like today, is fascinating. It is that nuance. It's not as simple as it used to be, where, you've been here 5 years, you're acculturated.
Yeah.
I can assure you, my grandparents have been here, 60 something. They're not acculturated one bit.
Yeah.
Not at all. And you know what? It's by design.
It's
by design.
It is. But we are, so Stacie, to add to what you were saying, we are the first generation where we're what we like to say almost reverse acculturating, right? We're going back and we're bringing back these cultures and these traditions that our families didn't teach us. And so we're teaching them to our kids because they want to learn, right? Look at Coco, look at, Encanto, and all of these movies that talk about just the tradition and then the complexities of just interfamily relationships, and they're bringing that forward. And so I think that that's giving space again to the generations that are coming up to demand more of that, because that's what they want to see. And I'm just so proud of where we are and where we're heading. And to finish off the targeting and all of that, and Stacie, you've said it a couple of times, the 1 + 1 = 4. It's smart business, right? Mm-hmm. Return on investment is higher, and if you take the time to do it right, you will be rewarded. I've seen it, like coming here into the agency and leaning into what we were already doing from a Hispanic point, and minor tweaks, and every single line where we tweaked it a bit to be Spanish first or in culture first, we absolutely turned up the dial on the return on investment, and it's magical. So
I totally agree. And I'm kind of more on the tactical side of things, meaning that, once you guys have decided exactly who it is you want to reach, we can go out there and find the audience that can match that profile, or do additional research to help you find where these people are located at, whether it's geographically. There are additional things that we have access to. Prism clusters is something that a lot of people use in other parts of their marketing. We're able to help you find those people and match those IP addresses to be able to serve it on multi-channels. So it's basically, you come to us with the strategies, and we can help you find the audiences that are going to help you accomplish those strategies. So I have a couple of people who we're down to about 6 minutes left. I had some comments I wanted to share with you guys, because I think your message is getting across. Ray is joining us from Miami. Hi, Ray. We agree.
We agree. We can help you with it if you have, although you probably know how to do it too, but if you need extra insights or details, any of the three of us can help out.
Absolutely. And whoops, I'm sorry. We didn't want to show Joanne's comment. We would, Neha asked if these numbers were specific to the US, and I wanted to share that, yes, they, for the most part, are specific to the US, although we do have research capabilities in Canada and Mexico and those types of things, if that's information that you're looking at. And Stacie, does Nielsen cover Canada and Mexico as well?
We do. We have a lot of regional data and global data that we put out. When it comes to Hispanics, the Hispanic experience is very much a U.S. Hispanic experience. You're not generally speaking, like even when we looking at like our European data, it's people aren't necessarily the same way identifying, like, oh, I'm from Spain, or I have the, it's a very different way that we look at the data internationally, but we do still look at intersectional identities internationally. We also look at data in Mexico and about behaviors around purchasing. There, it's also not being identified as Hispanic. People are identifying outside of that experience. So they're telling us if they're, Mexican African, or, other cultures. But yes, we have a lot of data. Most of what I talked about today, because we talked about population growth and trends in the US, are US based. The fascinating part about that, though, is when we travel, for example, many of us will be traveling next month to Cannes, to the Creative Advertising Festival there, and we'll be talking about media and publishers and advertising and creative. The US market really does serve as a bellwether for what we should be doing in other markets. So while the circumstances aren't exactly the same here as in other markets, the way we approach this nuance in advertising is something that can be modeled. And the truth is, if you are outside of the US and looking to break your product or market in the US, it's really crucial that you understand the multicultural community in the US and how to bring your product here. And when it comes to Hispanic communities, advertise with, one of the largest and most powerful community group in the US.
I have two more comments that I wanted to share with you both. Again, Tyler, talking about storytelling for these audiences, I think you're speaking Liz's language. And even too, Stacie, some of the examples that you said really are telling a story more so than just taking, an ad and translating it and putting some offers on it.
Well, to Tyler's point, I mean, storytelling is that's perhaps the most fascinating part of this work. Is all of us, and wherever you're working, you get a pile of data, right? Even if you're looking at your own metrics on actually, who does a great example? At the end of the year, or else Spotify gives you your Wrapped, right? And now everyone does a Wrapped. I think I got a Wrapped from Avis this year, like my most rented cities or something. But when Spotify started that a few years ago, and they were the first ones in the market with this concept of giving people back their own data on how they consumed music over the year, it was, when I look back, it was a remarkable turning point around how we all started absorbing the idea of storytelling with data on a very personal level. So you look at your own data for Instagram or for LinkedIn, right? How are your posts performing? But as Tyler points out here, we need, with this idea of looking at a pile of data and being able to turn it into a meaningful, valuable story. If Spotify had just told you you're most listened, it wouldn't have really meant much to you. But the way it was presented as a story made it meaningful and actionable. Wow, I can do this to influence an artist payout. I can consume more content. I can, things like this. So I love that you brought that up, Tyler, because we all have access to data all the time. White papers are great, spreadsheets are great, but it's only if you can turn that into a story that's actionable, as we're trying to do today, whether it's Liz talking about how to create, how to put together the right creative and media plan to drive the ROI, whether it's Syringa talking about how they can help you understand exactly where those audiences are based on the data that they have. That's when we turn data into something more than just a bunch of dots and digits.
All right. One last comment. I know that we talked earlier about the report that you just released from the AAPI community, but I don't think that it's a bad idea to have another one of these conversations that maybe delve into that community a little bit more, because it is growing rapidly and really has a lot of financial influence in this market as well.
Yeah, I think again, acknowledging it's AA and HPI month here in the United States, and it is important for us to not only talk about the power of the community, but to disaggregate it. Looking at Southeast Asians, looking at looking at China, looking at our recent report zeroes in on Vietnamese, Korean, Chinese, and Vietnamese, Korean, Chinese, and the Indian population in our most recent report. And that is just the very top of the iceberg. There really is the opportunity, depending on the market we look at, which you talked about, Liz, to think about, okay, if we're talking about San Francisco or the West, what communities should we be looking at? I agree that we've made a lot of progress in the Hispanic and Black community, and the Asian community is the next one. We all need to lean in harder, look for that data, and demand more.
I agree.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for your time today. This has really been fun. I'll follow this up with contact information for you guys, if that's okay. And let's do this again.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Liz. It's always great to see you. And thank you, Syringa, for the chance to talk about our work.
Thank you both.
All right.
Have a great one.
You guys have a great day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.